Hello, this is Christina Barton. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, today we're going to be talking about this not so shocking but terrifying and disturbing story about the DHS, how they have a program to target middle-aged pro-life advocates and budding conspiracy theorists under the guise of de-radicalization. And I posed well, I guess we'll get there when we get there, so I'll try not to have this intro too long. But yeah, we'll be talking about that. Some reports that were revealed because of a FOIA request. So it's pretty remarkable, and it's something that really needs to be talked about. But it's just kind of being revealed as of now. So we'll see if other people pick it up. But I wanted to talk about it because I felt it was important. Also, the border hasn't gotten any better, and it's getting really worse, especially with, Title 42 ending. But there's things that they could be doing right now that they're not doing it from a federal level. So Texas is going into action, deploying their National Guard, trying to do something. But it's probably like awful if you live on a border town right now, as far as people coming in. And you might be like, why don't we just let them all? If people are coming in like through your property and other things, and you don't know them, you don't know their criminal history, you don't know anything about them, I think you'd be a little freaked out if you were actually on those border towns. So regardless how you feel about immigration, and this is illegal immigration, you could have some more Put yourself in those people's shoes. Put yourself in those people's shoes, because we know what happens when these people, when Abbott and DeSantis sends them to left-wing cities. They don't want them. They don't want them, and they complain about it. You had Mayor Adams, Eric Adams, who complained and was like, well, they're sending him to this mayor who's black and this mayor who's black, implying that they're doing it because they're racist. And then he had to get called out and checked. And they're like, they're doing it to other mayors who aren't black, though. Are you saying it's racist? Like, no, that's what the New York Post is describing it. I didn't say he's racist. Yeah, but you're implying that. You're saying that. So, and knowing that they're not doing their job here, but knowing that they're using DHS to really look at their own citizens is pretty messed up, guys. It's pretty messed up. So we'll be talking about that. And also, it looks like Guardians of the Galaxy isn't quite meeting what they would like for it to meet right now, as far as their numbers. And it's kind of a bad opening as far as summer movies. So we'll talk about, like, I don't think it's just superhero fatigue. There might be some of that there, but I think people are kind of not as enthused with Marvel as they used to be. So, but we'll get to that at the very tail end if we have time. I'm going to try to keep this just an hour today, not go super long like yesterday. And we did start on time today. So before we jump into it, I would encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content, different articles, different videos, etc. I got a spicy article I'm working on right now that ought to be up today. So about bathroom issues, trans issues, and who should go where. And so that ought to be a spicy one. So be on the lookout for that. There's other articles will be dropping as well. I'll definitely be writing an article about the thing we're about to talk about. Also check out different videos that I have there. Also, of course, check out my book, Of Course God is Blatantly Against Abortion. It is available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Nobles. You can get it on paperback, or you can get it on ebook. So someone, I had posted, I've been posting a couple things on my YouTube channel about this. And someone who's pro-life, who isn't religious just made the point, like, I think, you should be able to argue these things without religion. I said, you guys know I do that all the time. And the backstory, I've repeated it so many times of how this book came to be. But I said to them, I'm like, okay, but you have to understand there's pro-life people who are Christian. I mean, there's Christians who claim to be pro-choice, who believe that, well, I don't like it, but God gave us free will, therefore we should let them do as they please or whatever. So I'm like, if this keeps kind of growing, and this mentality keeps growing within the Christian community, that's going to be really bad for the pro-life movement, because if they lose the religious people, that's a huge chunk of the movement. That's going to be bad. And they're like, oh my gosh, you didn't even think about that. That's a really good point. So, I could just argue like the science and the philosophy and all that stuff, but it was important to go this route too. So I encourage people to get this. Someone had questioned, well, what about the God, killing people in the flood? Or what about David's baby that died from adultery? We had adultery with Bathsheba. I'm like, I cover those things. I absolutely cover those things too. So there's a lot of objections. I've listened to a lot of people over the past couple of years, so I knew what to address in the book. And I got, a ton of stuff that, people say and question. It's in there, I promise you. It's very, very well-rounded. So again, available on Amazon, available on Barnes & Noble. Go ahead and pick it up. And pick it up for yourself and pick it up for someone who needs to read it. Okay, so also, if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blackteennews.com/donate. Cost to stream, cost to run my website, all that good stuff. So if you can support, I thank you very much for doing that. If you're watching on Facebook, you can send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you can do super chats and super thanks and stickers and whatnot. But if you would like to give, you can go to the website. There should be a link right to the website in the description. If you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, there's also a link to the book in the description. So you guys can click on that and, support. Also check out different merch that we have as well. Like my black tea mug, got that. This wonderful, Frederick Douglass shirt, which, July 4th will be around here very soon. So that's a really good shirt you could wear for the occasion, because that's actually from the 4th of July to a slave speech that was actually given on July 5th, because he knew better than to crap on the holiday. But it's a fabulous speech. If you've never read it, you should check it out. But yeah, go check out the merch. So I do have not a meme today to show you guys, and you guys know I like to start with something humorous. I'm starting with something funny, and it's a comedian who is a right-wing comedian, and his name is Nicholas DeSanto. Someone from Facebook, one of my one of my YouTube followers suggested I check him out. And so he has a whole set. This video is from a whole set of him talking about like pro-life issues. And I recommend go watching the whole thing. I'm just going to play a little teeny segment of it. So I think one day I'll probably just go over different comedians doing like pro-life skits. And, sometimes with comedy, you can say things that are dark and true. And it's like the court jester can be more honest about things. So Bill Burr, Chris Tucker, Dave Chappelle, they've had good commentary on the subject and have expressed like the rawness of it. And so this one is way more brutal, but I'm just going to play this teeny segment of it. You guys can go and watch it on your own time. But this joke, there's been some buildup of this joke going on, because this is like 4 minutes in. But this when it got to this portion of it, it did make me laugh out loud. So I'm just going to show this a little bit. And again, I recommend you guys go watch it sometime later. So.
Yeah. A lot of women killing their babies for their careers. Can you imagine killing your baby for your career and still be paid 30% less than a man? Can you imagine that? I mean, you can only imagine that because gender pay gap is a myth. It has been debunked time and time again. But can you imagine that? We can only imagine that. Yeah, so in the U.S., the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and that was a serious blow to casual dating and casual sex. But it was a major victory for babies who want to live. So, glass half full. And it was a major victory for Catholic biology. Do you guys know Catholic biology? I was born in Italy. I went to Catholic school. You know, according to progressive biology, they say my body, my choice, because according to progressive biology, a woman at some points in her life, she has a second beating heart, an extra pair of kidneys, 4 extra limbs. But according to Catholic biology, a woman throughout her life has only one brain, one heart, and so forth. So, in other words, if you are a woman and you ever find a second beating heart in your body, it's not your body. And if you're a man and you ever find a second beating heart in your body, it's not your body. Also, you are not a man.
We'll cut it off there. Again, you guys can go check it out. But yeah, his set's pretty funny. So I watch a couple of his videos. He has some other ones that are funny, but some of them, you know, comedians do reuse the same joke. So after I got to like the third, fourth one, I was like, okay. But yeah, that set was let's say just raw with the truth. So that was a good one. So that's our funny for the day. Moving on. I'll just touch on this a little bit, but there's this video footage that Fox had posted 2 days ago from their drone of people coming in just ready to storm the border. I don't know how this isn't just like a passive invasion that we've just kind of allowed to happen. And it's pretty remarkable. So there's it's a long line of a lot of people and a lot of able-bodied males, young men. Therefore, you know, I guess you can't blame anyone for really coming for economic reasons because, you know, America's great, though people here who hate it, you know, really diss it a lot. But, you know, it's... These aren't like war-torn refugees that, and if that was a situation, they would go to the nearest, you know, safe country and or come through the normal ports of entry. But this is not good, obviously, not good. And the Biden administration has not been doing their due diligence, or maybe they are doing their due diligence, but they're not not in the way that they should be doing it to squash this crisis. The first time I felt like kind of dread about the border situation was when Jen Psaki was still the press secretary, and they were talking about their plan to stop people from coming across the border. And so she mentioned how they were making like radio ads or like cartoons and different things in Spanish and stuff and airing them in different countries. And I'm just like, that's your plan, cartoons, to say don't come? And so then a journalist asked like, okay, well, what's your evidence that these things are working? And then she's just kind of like... we'll never know who decides not to come. I'm like, so y'all just do things with money you guys didn't earn. When you're in the government, you just take money you confiscated for the people, right? And you divvy it up whatever kind of way you want to put it where you need. And they've discovered that they needed to make cartoons, right? So they've made cartoons for the purpose of people not coming across the border, and they have no system, no kind of way to measure if that was successful at all. Hindsight now, I would say I don't think those cartoons were very successful, but that was the first time, like, you know, I of course didn't want him to win. I didn't want him to be the president. I didn't want him to, you know, be where he is or whatever. And I knew he was going to do bad things, but that was the first time, and it was still pretty early within the presidency, but it was the first time it was like real dread, like cold water had just been drenched and just like sliding down my neck and back and stuff. I'm like, we are being led by fools. So Mike Lee had retweeted this and said, this crisis is preventable even without Title 42. Obviously losing Title 42 with no plan and action in place could be make things tough. But it's not as though the Biden administration has no recourse to enforce the border without it. Quite to the contrary, if the asylum provisions of Title VIII were being properly implemented, the expiration of Title 42 authority wouldn't be a huge deal because asylum applicants would be detained while their asylum applications remain pending. And as soon as DHS ran out of bed space, they would start repatriating those crossing the border without documents and immediately seeking asylum. The current law allows for this. In fact, it requires this approach. Why then does the Biden administration refuse to take these steps? I've asked Alejandro Mayorkas this question over and over again and never received a satisfactory answer. I told him many months ago that if he is unwilling or unable to enforce the law to restore control at the border, he should step down and let someone else do the job. He still is not in control of the border and has not taken steps he could and should take to fix the problem. It's time to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. And yeah, people just think it's like right-wing, white folks upset about people spilling in, but there were minorities before who were upset about kind of like wage competition and other things, coming in, and that are still upset, and it'll only get worse. So something's got to give, but keep in mind that DHS is not doing their job as far as this. So let's take a moment today to look at what they are doing instead. So they have decided that they're going to do these trainings, and they had misinformation trainings that maybe you guys have seen before about like COVID and stuff. This article actually has one, but I'm not going to play it because if anything, YouTube is very like, I don't know how sensitive they are still about that topic, but they certainly were sensitive about that topic. I think more than anybody else. I think even more than Facebook. So this is from the Foundation of Freedom Online, wrote this article about this. Political police, new docs show DHS program to target middle-aged pro-life advocates and budding conspiracy theorists under the guise of de-radicalization. Newly obtained FOIA documents from America First Legal reveal Department of Homeland Security DHS plans to produce training videos that get bystanders to intervene against radicalization of their peers. DHS targeted suburban moms with pro-life beliefs and old high school friends who believe in conspiracies as examples of radicalized citizens in the need of bystander intervention. These findings add to the litany of evidence that DHS has shifted its focus from threats of foreign terrorism to monitoring and meddling in domestic U.S. Political beliefs. And this is something that Glenn Greenwald has talked about and repeatedly has said, especially like after like January 6th and stuff. But Glenn isn't like a right-wing person, by the way. People want to throw that at him because he's called out the left and stuff, but he used to be like their hero and stuff, but now they don't like him too much. But which, by the way, his husband passed away, so my condolences to him. But he's warned about this, and we're saying this, and he warned about it pretty early. So the FOIA documents on this is from 2021. So I think by the time when he was like saying, hey, they're doing this, they're going to start looking internally at citizens because they don't have like the same kind of, I don't know, gumption or reason or juice to go out and do things abroad. So they're going to look internally instead of stopping terrorists out there. They're going to look at our own citizens. And so, and maybe you at first you'd be like, well, there's a lot of people who are committing like acts of kind of terror these days, Antifa or, people firebombing, churches or pro-life centers and stuff like that. That's not stuff that they seem to be on top of too much, but they're on top of like people they don't like, which this shouldn't really come as a huge shock if you are not a kid, I guess, and you have been politically informed for a while. And you remember back to the Obama days when they used like the IRS to target and to discriminate against conservative groups. So if you had something like that, I don't know, patriot in your title, that would like flag in the system and stuff. So, there were things like that happened in the Obama administration. Now, there was never anything that like pointed the finger all the way up to the top. And I'm not saying Obama got on the phone and was like, hey, tell them to target pro-life people or conservative right-wing people. But I guess they didn't need to be told that, or will, there's always a fall guy or somebody in between. So a lot of people within the Obama administration just moved on to the Biden administration. And, Biden himself is from the Obama administration. It kind of, as you saw, like with the government who was looking into the Trump campaign and was doing things to undermine them as he was incoming as president or whatever. It was like the old administration, the Obama administration, was undermining the incoming administration so it could one day reinstall itself. And of course, Obama couldn't run again for a third term, but you have the person who was his VP, who's now currently president, and put within a lot of people who were within that past administration. Jen Psaki was in the Obama administration, for example. So anyway, I said I'm not surprised about this, but it is concerning and it is sad. And it's something that people need to be aware of, how much the government despises its own people. And we'll get to like the implications of these sorts of things, but I'm going to continue reading. Apparently not content with setting up a Ministry of Truth and Internet Censorship Directorate, and even a program controlling speech in video games, the Department of Homeland Security has devised yet another dystopian program for domestic thought control, punishing citizens to monitor each other's political beliefs under the guise of de-radicalization. So review new documents obtained by America First Legal under the Freedom of Information Act. The FOIA files show DHS's Office of Terrorism and Violence Prevention using taxpayer dollars in January 2021 to screenwrite an online choose-your-own-adventure style video series to de-radicalize friends and family. DHS's radicalization suspects in the video screenplays are not violent terrorists or extremists. They are typical everyday Americans with typical everyday American opinions. For example, DHS constructs a detailed pro-life profile for Anne, a middle-aged pro-life advocate. She is a suburban mom surrounded by stock footage of laundry and a minivan who has become increasingly more concerned about the welfare of other children. Anne is an example of an ordinary American who happens to be pro-life, who has to have a pro-life opinion. But according to DHS, an agency first created to stop another 9/11, this opinion warrants a government-funded, isn't it? I know 9/11 was, I mean, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but it was a long time ago. But when you think about how, not that long in the span of things, so some of these government agencies, they're not that old. They're not that old. This opinion warrants a government-funded video training instructing her entire community to treat her as a radical and take the real-life action against her First Amendment protected statements. Audiences of DHS's de-radicalization videos would take the role of bystanders that are given options on how to intervene in Anne's political development. For example, audience watch Anne's activities from the perspective of her preacher, her longtime friend, and her hairdresser. In one scenario, Anne utters the phrase "baby killer" at a public ribbon cutting event at a local bakery. DHS gives you, the bystander, 3 choices: calling Anne's husband, contacting Anne's preacher, or stopping by Anne's house. So, okay. Baby killer isn't the best choice of words when you're trying to have like a rational dialogue, I guess, to make someone see your point of view on this topic. It's also not an inaccurate descriptor. So, yelling that out loud, because, people can get heated in discussions or whatever. So if someone said that out loud and in public, I'm assuming they're having a conversation with someone on this topic. And I've seen a lot of, conversations get heated. So that would warrant you as a bystander to call her husband and say, what's wrong with your crazy wife? Is she a terrorist? Like, this is, you are an employee at a new bakery about to open in Elkville. I didn't think this was funny the first time I looked at it. I was really horrified, but now what can you do but laugh? It's so ridiculous. As the mayor walks up to the ribbon at the bakery entrance, you hear another attendee yell, "Baby killer," towards them. You turn and find the shouter and are shocked to see it's Anne, a woman you've always known to be empathic in the past. Once at home, and it says, call Anne's husband to discuss what you just witnessed, to check to see if everything's been okay lately. Contact Anne's preacher and ask about her behavior, and stop by Anne's house to chat and see how she's doing. So I'm like, what's the preacher gonna say? And what would you do with the preacher if the preacher just began to lecture you instead about what abortion actually does or something? Would you then call, I don't know, his who's over him, if there's someone over him, and depending on the denomination, like call each member and tell them to stop paying tithes? Like, what where does this go? The scenario is so crazy. So if this is a ribbon cutting ceremony, so I don't know who she's calling this in the scenario, but so if there was like, if you shouted something at a politician or something, like the mayor who supports abortion, and you say that to them, then the alarm bells goes off, and all of a sudden you're on a list with the FBI. What does this mean? In another scenario, as Anne's hairdresser, viewers listen to Anne bring up a pro-life arguments and ranting, after which Anne shows videos of violent protests on her phone. Bystanders are given 3 choices: calling the sheriff on Anne, talking about Anne to coworkers, or researching the groups Anne talked about. Now, if Anne is, it's funny that they're going this route. I'm not saying that pro-life groups, there hasn't been anyone who wasn't violent in the past, but we've seen like groups that have been violent toward pro-life groups. What about Roe's Revenge and stuff? That's a recent phenomenon, but it's funny they're going this route. I mentioned on YouTube, I'm like, if you were a part of DHS and you wanted to like do some kind of program or training like this to spot people who were engaged in some kind of domestic terrorism or something, what route would you go? Like, what examples would you use? Wouldn't you use like stuff like people who are frustrated with the political process and are now talking about taking up violence? And that can be people on the right and the left, right? Or you could do scenarios where people are very obsessed with the race, and they like have a hatred for people who don't look like them. And that could be both sides. That could be like radical, like, I don't know, Black Israelite people. That could be people who are white supremacists. It could, that could go whatever way, and you could do your training for that way. You could do people who are radically religious, who want to convert by violence. There's routes to go, but I just wouldn't jump to suburban mom yelling baby killer. Like, and especially like a suburban mom, rural mom from Elkville. Usually when there's instances like something like this, they're usually, not saying that women can't do it, because there's definitely been like some Tifa ladies or BLM folks like that participating in stuff. Or BLM has done a lot of domestic terror as of recent. So, 2020, this is 2021. So why not stuff like that? There was young professionals firebombing places or doing Molotov like cocktails and stuff. So those are the routes they could have went, but they went with Anne, the suburban a rural housewife who doesn't want to see babies die. That is weird, guys. That is really, really weird. So how twisted and radical are these people who are running our government, who are over people who are within our government, who are training people to look at stuff like this? And I assume not just for maybe their consumption, but other people's consumption, to look at your neighbor like they are the enemy. I think it's important for people to see something, say something, but they're really trying to create like an enemy where there ought to not be one here. So yeah, if she's looking at like violence, or seems like she's encouraging some kind of violence, like that's where Anne's going off the deep end. But it's just interesting that these are the scenarios that they go with. So there's also one with Courtney, an old high school friend of an audience member's who has become a budding conspiracy theorist. She too has is associated by DHS with the imagery of suburban mom, laundry minivan. What gets her wrapped up in DHS's informant dragnet is that after her divorce, she has become fixated on conspiracy theories regarding government connections to child abuse and trafficking, which, by the way, I also want to point out in Anne's profile, they're like, Anne was always religious, but even more so after her mother died. I'm like, yeah, people tend to do that. You know, there are people who will pull away from faith after tragedy, and then there's people who find a lot of comfort in faith after tragedy. So to put that as kind of like the warning signs or alarm bells is just really rich. But old high school friend and radicalization suspect Courtney, mid-30s, divorced, bystanders, old high school friend, mother, boyfriend. Visually, we see a portrait of our protagonist, Courtney, along with stock footage that you would associate with suburban mom, laundry minivan, etc. Sound effects to help Courtney's environment. This is Courtney. She is a divorced mother of 2 in her late 30s. Her children have always been her world, but after moving to a new city, she has made a new group of friends and has joined volunteer groups for underprivileged youth. Ooh, she sounds terrible. She has become fixated on conspiracy theories regarding government connections to child abuse and trafficking. So there's a lot of people who believe a lot of crazy things, including about this particular topic. But there's some inappropriate things that just happen, that our government knows about. I think Epstein, obviously, we'll never know how deep that rabbit hole goes, apparently. But there's been reports in which we've covered at the time when it came out, but there's like a couple different cases of like people involved within like the FBI and stuff who were caught up in like inappropriate things with kids themselves, and they didn't really get time or much time. There's just a lot of creepy things in this world. And I'm not saying Courtney's not crazy, but if they're trying to make people who aren't crazy seem crazy, that's messed up. That's messed up. They're not making a huge case for her being crazy here. In the case of Courtney, spreading conspiracy theories and even the perceived level of anger rising in online posts is sufficient to trigger DHS involvement. DHS gives 3 choices to bystanders: monitor Courtney's other posts and conversations, check with her ex-husband, or message her to snoop on her private life. DHS also built a stock profile. Pete's kind of boring, but so I'm not going to go over Pete, but the Courtney, I don't see specifically to what is so angering about her rhetoric. So I don't, if it's like rhetoric, like she's about to do some kind of violence or something, that's messed up. And that something should be done. Absolutely. But If you believe that something is causing some harm to some children, people tend to get upset about that. So rising anger is different than advocating for violence or some kind of terroristic threat. So this is all very weird. This is all very dark and strange. And this is our government and how they're eyeing suburban white women. And just FYI to those of you out there watching who are suburban white women, just recall that, your allegiance is with the Biden administration right now, or not totally, but you left some of like the Trump vote and went over to Biden and stuff because you didn't like him. And I can understand it, like he's not a perfect person for sure, very prickly, and I get it, but is this how they're seeing you? It's how they're seeing you, and I wonder how many of us are on list. I wonder how many of us are on list somewhere. I've got to wonder. So, it's a crazy story. Crazy story. They have a vaccine thing, censorship cartoon in here too, but I'm not going to play it again because, YouTube was way too sensitive about that during the pandemic time. But yeah, that's our government. So an interesting thing to note though is that we have people who are really into red flag laws and pushing red flag laws and stuff. I'm concerned what's going to flag. Aren't you concerned what's going to flag? Because if Anne can be in a video tutorial for DHS on how to like defuse or de-radicalize or spot like potential domestic terrorists, and what set you off was that she apparently was upset about an abortion politician and called them a baby killer. If you don't use words that direct, do they still qualify to get you flagged? I just want to know, like, we've had, people in this country who have gone to clinics and been arrested. There was in the UK, there was a woman who's like praying outside of a clinic and stuff. And there was a man who got into an altercation with someone, and the case ended up getting dropped or whatever, because there wasn't like the evidence there or whatever, but the Biden administration still want to go after him. So he ended up like getting off and stuff by the jury. Like it was very, very quick and useless and pointless to make him go through that. But that's where the Biden administration is, we never found out the leaker for the opinion, though the pool of suspects shouldn't have been that large. It really seems like it's going one way here. And that our justice is being weaponized a lot, but I'm sure saying that is gonna end up make me go on some list somewhere. But back to the red flag laws, what's gonna be flagged as being some kind of threat or mental person? If Anne's profile is she became more religious after her mother died, that's not an unnatural thing. That is not an unnatural thing at all. But it's a footnote for DHS, the same DHS that could be managing the border in some kind of competent way, but they're not. It's almost like they're doing everything that you wouldn't do to get the situation that they want. So either they're very talented at what they want to accomplish, or they're very bad at their jobs and shouldn't have them. So it seems like it's kind of one or the other. But they're more focused on you and not liking you and coming at you. So that's our creepy world today. So admire and fight for your liberties while you can, because I promise you that someone is trying to figure out how to get rid of them, take them away. So looks like Last thing I want to mention before we go is that Guardians of the Galaxy is having the worst summer opening in like 20 years. This is from Cosmic Book News. So it's interesting because a lot of people really like Guardians. It's not my favorite among the Marvel films, never was, but a lot of people really, really are into it. And these are still people from like the original phase, you know, and this isn't like their fourth film or something. It's still their third. So they're finishing up their trilogy. Which they report James Gunn's Volume 3 box office fizzles with only 114 million, much less than Volume 2 time is It's Time to Worry. James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy 3 box office fizzles with only 114 million, which is less than the low estimates of 120 million. The number is at least better than the 110 million the flick was lining up to have just prior to release, but not by much. It's definitely something to worry about, as Volume 2 opened over 146 million, so that is nearly 25% decrease. Then they put in an update. Disney is reporting an opening of 118 million. Another major thing to worry about, I believe it's the lowest box office to kick off the summer season in over 20 years, going all the way back to 2001 Shrek's, and not counting the pandemic. So that is a complete disaster on part of Kevin Feige and Marvel. The good news is the low Guardians opening summer box office may not mean much, as Super Mario recently hit it through the roof, now over 1.1 billion. So that means people are still coming out to the movie theaters. They're just not coming out to see Marvel anymore, and that's on Marvel. As I previously said, all hope now lies with the word of mouth to save Guardians of the Galaxy 3 box office, because it doesn't have any legs and plummets as fast as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium. You're looking at a box office gross of only around 500 million. Again, a huge disaster, as Volume 2 scored over 863.7 million and the first Guardians over 773 million. Volume 3 might not even surpass the first movie's box office that introduced the fans to the unknown property of characters. So, I don't know. It's... Now, I haven't seen it, and when the second one came out, that was still at a time when we were really still into the films. The last film, I guess we all went to go see, when a Marvel movie would come out, we would go Thursday night, my family and some church members and stuff. For the longest time, actually, our Facebook church profile was a picture of us at the movies, and someone was like, we should change that. So we did change it. But we like to go to the movies together, and my dad's always been into comic books. We have thousands of comic books, and grew up reading them before I was like commentating politics and stuff. I was just basically commentating on pop culture stuff, comics, and going to Comic Cons, etc. So we're really into it. So after Endgame, I didn't love Endgame, so that was the last. Some of them did. My dad still like loves that stuff, but that was the last film I think we all went to go really see together, like a Thursday night opening. And then it was just kind of like the love for it died off a lot. But for me though, I have a gripe with Disney. I feel like they extraordinarily detest me. Maybe almost as much as DHS, if not more. They detest their customers who built their brands, who love these brands, who built them up. And I, take a page out of Eric July's book, and when he says you shouldn't give more than 50% of your money to people who hate you, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. So something to cut out that I feel like it cut out was like, Disney, and Disney owns just about everything, so it's hard to cut off, like, I don't know, ABC News and other stuff. I don't actually watch ABC News, but maybe everything that they do, but their bread and butter is Disney Plus and these Marvel films and stuff. So I haven't watched any of like the new Star Wars stuff. I didn't watch Kenobi. I didn't watch Mandalorian. I haven't watched. The last Marvel thing that I watched was WandaVision. So I haven't watched any of it, but a lot of people still really liked Guardians and enjoyed it. I don't know how many people are still upset or still thinking about James Gunn's, the director's pedo tweets. If you don't know about that, I do have an article on blacktnews.com that talks about it. It's an article about Whoopi Goldberg and how Disney like went after other people for stuff, and she was still kept her job and stuff. So it mentions Roseanne, it mentions Gina Carano, and it mentions James Gunn. So there's some background on there. I'm not going to jump to the whole thing today, right now, but yeah, he had some really gross tweets, really gross, inappropriate tweets, and he got fired. And then the cast and stuff wrote a letter. They wanted him back, and they were like, we're not doing this without him. And they hired him back. So he, finished up his series. And now he's going to run, the DC universe with that, I guess you can't cancel everybody. So, but yeah, there was some gross stuff that he would tweet. So I don't think people are like not going because of that. I think people just don't love the films as much as they used to, and you have to kind of love them to be dedicated, because there's this huge story that's been going on for 15, 20 years now, that has it been that long? When did Iron Man come out? Like, maybe not 20 years, but it's been like at least 15 or something, right? Iron Man probably came out like 2008-ish or something like that. If people had to follow that all the way to kind of now, and they're not dedicated or don't love it as much, at some point people are going to drop stuff and not be into it as much. It's amazing that they've kept their numbers how they have for so long. But there's got to be some kind of fatigue. The numbers are going to drop off. They're not going to be as huge as they were. And then there's been like talk about the effects haven't been as good because of pressure that they've had doing so many projects. And this is like in general for the Phase 4. Also, people don't like the storylines. There've been a lot of woke stuff in Marvel, and people have just kind of been cutting out. There's people who just frankly root for them to fail or expect for them to fail. And then they hire writers that don't like their trolls, that want to mock their trolls, instead of trying to focus on actually making something good that they can't legitimately critique. Like you see, like there's a situation with the She-Hulk show. So you have people who aren't too confident in this brand anymore, but they're saying that people are watching it and they are liking it. So maybe like, numbers will uptick and stuff or whatever. But and it's not that it's doing bad, but they invest a lot of money in these things. So I like Chris Pratt, and wish him well. I'm not going to see the film, but I know my family, who again usually would go see these movies on Thursday night for the big opening weekend. Some of them are going tonight for like Tuesday when it's cheaper. And but some of them don't want to see it. Like my sister Sabrina's like, I don't want to see it. So there's Katrina in the chat. She's going to see it tonight. So I won't. So I think it's interesting. But I think if Disney doesn't just stop with a lot of their woke stuff, they're going to continue to see their numbers decline overall. I can't be the only person who's just like, you know what? It's not worth investing if you kind of hate me. I don't think I'm the only person who feels like that. So anyway, that's the show. That's all my things I had aligned today. I told you guys I wanted to keep it about an hour, so there we go today. We talked about some really important things though. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. Please go ahead and check out my book, Of Course God is Blatantly Against Abortion. I cover so many things that are in the book. It starts off, I have my intro kind of detailing like how extreme things are kind of today. And then it goes into the biology. And then it goes into philosophy. It talks about rights, etc. The first chapter is very long. There's an intro, then there's humongously long first chapter. And then the second chapter goes into the sovereignty of God. Like I mentioned earlier, people like, well, how can, you say like abortion is wrong, but God kills? I'm like, did you just compare a woman having an abortion to God? Like this, who has power over life and death? So, I cover those things. I know that's how people think, and I know that's what the questions that people ask. And this book has been a building block of different objections and that people have had, that I've met and that I've countered, and then I've talked and I've listened, and I've just compiled everything I could basically think of that I've had to encounter, and I put it together in this book. And so it goes off into the theology for a while, and then it talks about separation of church and state. It talks about why we need objective morality, even if you really don't have a moral authority to say this is that, why we still need to have some kind of standards, and why we need to at least pretend like life is intrinsically valuable, because if you get to pick and choose who is valuable and who's not, how do you know, how do I know that you're gonna not say that Black people aren't valuable or something? And you can't say it didn't happen. You can't say it didn't happen or something. So how do I know if you get to pick and choose who's valuable, who's not? Like I feel like we're all kind of at a disadvantage if it's just randomized, and we get to just choose who's going to be discriminated against. So we could at least have a very consistent standard of, well, when you are human and start your human existence, that should kind of be the point where we just decide it's wrong to brutally murder you. So, but it also, talks about redemption over condemnation for women. I didn't write this book to condemn women to hell or anything like that. That's not my purpose, not my goal, and the opposite of what this book does. So there's a lot in it. So please go ahead and check it out. It's on Amazon, and it's on Barnes & Noble. Also, I will be at Motor City Comic Con, not this weekend, but next weekend. So if you're in the Metro Detroit area and you'd like to come and see some of my books and see what I'm doing, you can go ahead and pick up a book and talk. This is a picture with me and 15 of my books. I now have 17 that are published now, so I'll have to take a new photo. But I write on all kinds of different things. I have 2 that are nonfiction, and my abortion book is one of my nonfiction, but the rest are, I got a children's chapter book, a super kid. Kids tell me it's epic, so they'll really enjoy that if you got kids or grandkids. So you can pick up Super Kid. I got a book about a vampire. I got books about my latest book I released is Embers on a Dying Moon. That one is a sequel to my werewolf book, Phases of a Broken Sky. I don't have a picture up here right now. The cover is really good. I do my own covers, with the exception of the abortion book. I did make it, but not the illustration with the finger and with God and the baby. But this is my historical fiction fantasy series. So imagine like the Civil War meets X-Men. So I got a lot of different things you guys can check out. So if you go to blacktnews.com and you go on the merchandise section, there's a banner at the top with my books on it. If you click on it, it'll take you to my book website, ninjadustpublishing.com. So that's if you go to my website, that's the easy way to find everything. Or you could just look for me on Amazon. I thank you to people who have followed me on Amazon, people who've bought my books. I have been asked to do like a story time of how I started everything and why I started to write, kind of my process. So I do have a channel for Ninja Dust Publishing. It's not very big, but I will do that on here since people have asked, and I do appreciate people who have supported me as we try to build up the culture. Someone has to do it, so I'm glad to participate. So go ahead and check out my stuff. Also, check out merch on Black Tea News, like the I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For shirt and other shirts that we have. And also, if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com. It costs a stream, it costs to run a website, all that good stuff. So if you can support in that way, God bless you. I very much appreciate it. Thank you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. God bless.